Hey crew, we got the candy dispenser back in walls here, and this one is from a solid block of wood, and it's all modeled up, so we are now ready to switch over to the cam tab right up there. So click that tab. That's where all of our cam operations are for doing CNC work. And the first thing we have to do is a setup, so click the setup button. And we're actually going to switch over to the stock tab first and get the size of this material prepped. And the easiest thing to do in this one is just to leave it relative size box and switch all of our offsets to 0. Because so much of our original block is going to be left when we're done and we're just carving the inside. This is the quickest, easiest way to get to those numbers for our stock dimensions. If we were carving around the outside and removing a lot of material, well then we would switch over to a fixed size box, some wood that's already prepped. But again, relative size box, all zeros. These should be the numbers that you have also. Then we'll go back to the setup tab. And we need to make sure the XYZs are pointing the right direction. In this case, the Z needs to be up and down is the biggest one. So we're going to switch from model orientation to Z and X, and we're going to choose our own directions to make sure it points the way we want. You can see the Z is highlighted blue, so it's ready to be selected, and it's really any vertical edge on the model. Even these edges of fillets would work, but for me, I just find the edge of the block to be the easiest. So I just click on that edge, and the Z is now pointing the way I'd like it to be. If it would happen to be upside down, you just click this little flip to toggle it so the Z is pointing up. And then we're going to click on the X button, and we're going to choose this side to be our X right here. So click on that bottom edge, works really nice. And that sets all the XYZ arrows the directions we want them. The last thing to do now is to choose the stock point. So click on that arrow and then click on this dot, this corner of our material. That is where we want 0 to be, the top surface, bottom left corner of this object. And if it all matches there, then we should be good to click OK. The yellow goes away on the first operation. So then we'll click 2D adaptive. That's the first way, that's the clearing operation we're going to use. So 2D adaptive. We're going to choose a tool. We're going to go by type, flat mill, and down to 3/8. It does not really matter which one you pick. I'll just choose the first one. Select it. Go right back into tool again, because now I want to edit this tool that we are going to use. So while it's highlighted, then we'll click the edit button. We're going to change a few things on this tab. We should be on the cutter tab. And then we're going to change a few things here. We're going to leave the 3/8 alone for diameter. We're going to change flute length. We need a flute that's a little bit taller, so 1.25. And what you'd have to do is you'd have to know what tools you have, and I already know this one, so that's why I'm helping you set this up. So we have a tool with 1 1/4 inch flutes. We want the flutes to be taller than the cavity that we're cutting. The computer says, hey, it needs, we can't do that, so we're just going to change body length to 1.5, and we're going to change overall length to 3. And those are the only ones we don't really need to mess with shoulder length, or obviously shaft diameter matches cutting diameter. We'll then switch over to feed and speed. We're going to set the spindle speed for 18,000. It's a pretty standard number in the CNC router. Cutting feed rate, we can make that 100. But we are going to change our lead in and lead outs to 50. And our ramp to 50 also. Just click off of it, or just click any other box. It'll put all your units back on there. And we're going to change the number of flutes to 2. There we go. And I think that is all of them. Plunge feed rate can stay at 33. That is fine, about 1/3 of the cutting. All the rest of the numbers then should be good. We can now click OK. And yes, let's just go ahead and do that. Mine just says 2D Adaptive 5 because I've been practicing a little bit or using the other files, so this just happens to be my 5th try at this. So if yours says Adaptive 1 or 2 or 3, that doesn't matter. As long as it's 2D Adaptive, that's the same operation we have to have. And it's just looking back over at this one that I'm setting up. But I'm going to say yes, and say OK, and then select. And then what should happen is all these numbers should auto change to what we set in the tool. And we use this tool one more time again on the next operation, so they should pre-fill again. So anyway, we're still on 2D adaptive. The next tab is the geometry we're going to cut. So I just shade this bottom surface of the cutout. That defines where we want this to cut. Heights tab should all be fine as defaults. Bottom is our selected contour, so we don't want the tool going any lower than that. We're going to just leave optimal load at 0.15, so about half the cutting tool. Not quite, but it's a good number for now. It can cut both ways, that's fine. We can check the box. It does say 90 the other way. We can just make that say 100. So it's the feed rate and the same in both directions. And we are going to set multiple depths. This is a 1-inch depth. So I want it to go a little bit more than half the first one. So I'm going to say 0.55. And for stock to leave, we want to leave a little bit radial. That means the side of the tool, like the radius direction of the tool. But axial is the Z direction. That we're going to switch to 0. Okay. And then we're going to go to the last tab just to double check, but I'm pretty sure there is nothing on here to fix. Helix is how it would like coil down in as it cuts into the material. But everything looks good there, so click OK. Doing a little bit of thinking. If nothing happens, just click on it once, and there are all the tool paths. You should see we have 2 heights of tool paths. We can do a quick simulation to see what that looks like. Turn on the stock, reset the view, and hit play once. There we go, and you can see how it's cutting both ways as it goes. And just working its way across the part. Turn that speed up a little bit, and so on, right to the end. Both paths, or both depths, and there's what we have for our finished first operation. Looks good. Close. Then next thing we're going to do is we left a little bit of material on the walls of this cavity, so we got to go clean that up. So we're going to go to 2D contour. You can see it remembers the last tool being used, so that's slick. All the info is good. Right away we can go to what contours we want to clean up. So we're going to click these bottom edges, and we may have to do a couple of clicks to get them to select all together. There we go. Well, that one all selected just fine. I'm going to try that one more time. I'm going to clear it. I'm going to move my cursor around until I get all of it to turn. There we go. I'm going to start from the bottom. There we go. So clicking on a different location gave me that edge in one selection with the arrow down at the end. And then I'll repeat on the other side. And at this moment, I don't think it'll matter if the arrows are starting from either end. That should be fine. Then we're going to go to our heights tab. The bottom again should be selected contours. That's always the one I worry about the most. And to make sure we just have some other, these retracts and clearances are just above the material. But again, default is fine here. Then the depth, the passes tab. No multiple depth, no stock to leave. We are just doing a single light cut the whole way back and forth to clean up those walls to get a nice smooth finish on them. And here again, we don't have to check anything. Let's click OK. It processed. I click on it once. Sure enough, there's a tool. So let's simulate those. And this time I'm going to click Setup because in order to see what this one looks like, we have to also redo that one. So Setup, Simulate, and we'll hit Play again. Fast forward this pretty fast. Get through that. You can slow it down here. All right, so here we go. It's finishing up that adaptive. Do the other side, finishing the adaptive, and immediately switches into the contour passes. So it's cleaning up those walls with a nice light pass. Okay, that looks good. Notice no red anywhere. That's a really good thing. Otherwise, that's a collision of some kind. We can close that simulation. And the last thing we would do is if we want to drill this hole out on the CNC router, we're going to use a boring operation. So click the drop on the 2D milling, bore, same exact tool yet, already set. Go to the geometry tab, get that cylinder face for the hole, depths. Now the whole bottom, we are actually going to put, we're just going to leave that set to 0. I don't want to accidentally go any further out the bottom. So again, we'll leave everything just set to defaults here. Go to the passes tab, everything looks fine. And again, everything is fine on this one. Click OK with defaults. And it's really hard to see, but the boring tab, because this hole is 0.380 versus 375 for our cutting tool, it's a really tiny coil as it goes down and drills. And once that hits the bottom, it immediately retracts. And let's see what that looks like. So setup, simulate, and if you also want, you can click on the timeline. That lets you jump to those locations. So here's the near the end of our 2D contour. Let's click play. I'm going to pause this and slow it down just a little bit to see if we can see that boring operation. It's feeding down, and we should see, oh, it's barely wiggling. It's super hard to see, but it's just tiny coil as it was going down in there. And it's already done. But once again, no red anywhere on our timeline. That's very good. We can now close this. And with everything looking good, we would now post-process this for the Laguna router. So click on the post-process button. There's our Laguna CNC router machine. We can switch it to the G drive folder, wherever so that way it knows where your stuff is being saved to. We want to give this a simple little name, so I'd probably go my initials. So go your initials, KJ dash CD for candy dispenser, and make sure you switch this to millimeters. That's super important right there. And let's go ahead and post it. So if you didn't tell it where to locate earlier, you can always tell it where to save to now. Now I'm doing a demo, so I'm just putting mine on the desktop. You should be putting yours in the group drive, Genota folder, class your name. And there we go. There's lines of code. And that's what makes the machine run. And at this point, you would get a USB, do a save as, and put that, or save this code onto a USB drive that would then go in the Laguna router. I can close that, and I believe that kind of wraps up our cam work for the candy dispenser block of wood here. Hopefully that helps. See you in the next video.